On September 16, 1974, the plane carrying U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger touched down at Cairo International Airport. The visit was strange, almost inexplicable. It was the first American diplomatic visit to Egypt since the October War of 1973. Relations between the two countries were ice cold, yet just 3 days before this visit, out of nowhere, Washington had made a sudden, unannounced decision to mend fences with Cairo. No official reason was given. American statements spoke of regional visits, of no real problems between the two nations, of how long the absence had been, and how much Egypt meant to them. None of it was true. All of it was diplomatic noise, because behind this visit was a reason far bigger than anything you'd imagine. In the Egyptian city of Aswan, President Anwar Sadat sat down with the American Secretary of State. And near the end of the meeting, very quietly, almost timidly, Kissinger turned to Sadat and said, "We have a small request. That young woman you have in custody, the 27-year-old, we'd like her released back to us." Sadat looked at him calmly and delivered 3 words that ended everything. "I'm sorry, she's already been executed." With that sentence, the meeting was over. Kissinger flew back to Washington empty-handed, completely convinced that the prisoner was dead. But let me stop you right there, because she wasn't dead. Not even close. She was very much alive at that exact moment. And what happened next, the details leading up to her execution and the execution itself, is stranger than anything you've seen in a spy film. If you love intelligence thrillers, detective stories, and the kind of chess match where one side is brilliant and the other thinks they're winning, stay with me, because today's story can't be done justice by any other telling. And this time, it's not a story from Europe or America. It happened right here in the Arab world. So, I need you to focus closely, because you're about to hear the details of the most brilliant operation ever used to capture the most dangerous spy in Arab history. For those watching me for the first time, I'm Amin, the narrator. I cover everything strange and mysterious happening on this planet. And as always, before we begin, we haven't forgotten. We're still boycotting. We're still committed. And don't let this video, no matter how good it is, distract you from our cause. Now, I have 2 pieces of news for you today, and I hope they're good ones. You've been asking me in the comments to make longer episodes and upload more frequently. Today's video is double the usual length, and God willing, there will be another one out this week. So, longer videos, more of them. I'll read every single comment on this video, and we'll see together whether we should keep increasing the length and frequency, or stay at one 15-minute video per week. Tell me what you think down below. I read everything. Let's figure it out together. And one last thing. I don't usually ask this, but it genuinely matters in the YouTube world. Most of my audience are adults, people with experience and discernment. And videos like mine deserve to break past the 1 million view mark. That's all I'll say. Now, let's get back to the voice you love and the story you came here for. Today we're talking about Heba Saleem, the most dangerous and cunning spy ever exposed in Egyptian history. And as always, I promise you, even if you think you know the story, there are details and layers you've never heard before. I'll tell you all of them today. And everything I'm about to share is verified and accurate, because on this channel, when we research a subject, we go through every available source, including those from our enemies. July 13th, 1947. An Egyptian girl is born. Her name is Heba. She was not like any ordinary girl. She came from money. Old, deep, generational money. And a life of privilege that only 1 in 1,000 Egyptians of that era could even imagine. Heba was the daughter of Abdul Rahman Salim Amer, considered one of the most powerful and wealthy figures in the Sahel Salim district of Asyut Governorate in Upper Egypt. In those days, social class was everything in the Arab countryside. The rich stayed rich, the poor worked for them. And since Heba's father was one of the most powerful men in the region, I don't need to explain the kind of life she grew up in. But if you're wondering why I'm emphasizing their wealth so much, give it a few minutes. You'll understand exactly why. Because I'm going to prove to you that money isn't everything, not even close. At some point, Heba's father, Abdul Rahman, decided to move to Cairo. He entered politics and government work with a plan to combine both worlds, money and power. The money he already had, through trade, investments across the country, and an enormous inheritance from his family. An inheritance so vast he owned entire villages that worked under his authority. The only thing left to acquire was power. And through his vast network of connections, that came quickly. His very first visit to Cairo resulted in his appointment as Deputy Minister of Education. Some sources say he had actually been a government employee who climbed the ranks over time. But what's clear is that his connections were the primary engine of his rise. Academic credentials helped too, though no source explains precisely who opened which doors for him or how. What's clear is that Abdul Rahman gained far more power and influence than he had ever dreamed of. He moved his entire family to the Mohandisin district of Cairo, one of the most prestigious and affluent neighborhoods in Egypt at the time. Heba was 13 years old when they made the move. She went from a palatial estate in the countryside to the most exclusive address in the capital. She joined the local country club, an exclusive world of sports, events, and social circles that most Egyptians had never even heard of. And life continued this way until 1965, when Heba turned 18. With every advantage in the world behind her, she excelled academically and enrolled in Cairo University's Faculty of Arts, majoring in French literature, a language that would ultimately become her curse. She was among the top students in her department, and when she graduated, she finished second in her entire class. That achievement changed the direction of her life in ways she could never have foreseen. And this, right here, is where the real story begins. But before we go further, there's one detail I need you to remember, because we're coming back to it later. When Heba entered university, like any daughter of Cairo's elite, she moved from her old club in Mohandisin to a new one, the Gezira Sporting Club. Parties, friends, travel, a social life that was perfect in every sense. Nothing missing, except for one persistent irritant. There was a man who wouldn't leave her alone, always around, always trying to get close. He was a source of endless frustration for her. She tried every possible way to brush him off, but he never gave up. Throughout her entire time at the club, he kept pursuing her, and she kept refusing, kept turning away. This man was a military engineering officer in Egypt's elite Thunderbolt forces. His name was Farouk El-Feki. Despite his rank and status, he never gave up the chase. Year after year, she gave him nothing, not a glance. Remember that name, Farouk, because he is the root of everything that follows. But for now, let's set him aside and return to Heba, who graduated in 1969, second in her class, as I said. And because of her exceptional performance and remarkable presence, the head of the French literature department at Cairo University, who was of French origin himself, arranged a scholarship for her to study at the Sorbonne in Paris. Now, this should have been impossible for several reasons. Scholarships typically went to the top graduate, not second place. And beyond that, Heba, despite all her privileged city life, came from a traditional Upper Egyptian family. It was almost unthinkable for her family to allow her to live alone in Europe. But the professor went directly to the university, secured a special exception for Heba, and then personally met with her father to convince him. After enormous pressure, the father agreed. But on one condition: Heba had to live with a trusted family friend who was already living in France, a colleague named Omar Galal Hussein. And so Heba went to Paris, and the extraordinary, unexpected events began immediately. On her second day in France, she met, by what appeared to be pure coincidence, a young woman of Polish origin named Natasha. Natasha became her closest and only friend. Now, whether this meeting was engineered or genuinely accidental, you won't find a clear answer in any historical source. But let me put something to you. Ask anyone who's ever lived far from home. The moment you land in a foreign country and realize you'll be there alone for a long time, something opens up inside you. A void, a longing for home, for familiarity, for belonging. And that void, whoever fills it first, holds enormous power over you. The first kind person you meet abroad becomes your anchor. And that's exactly why we hear so many stories of fraud and manipulation targeting students and immigrants abroad. If you're watching this and you've lived that experience, confirm it in the comments. The point is, Heba wrote in her diary that Natasha replaced her family. They were together every day. Parties, events, student gatherings. Natasha made sure that massive void left by an absent, distant father was filled completely. Here's the detail that should make everything click into place. Natasha wasn't just Polish, she was Jewish. And now you begin to see the game. Over 6 months, Natasha systematically took Heba to a cultural center called the Peace Center for God's Chosen People. The name alone should tell you everything you need to know. In short, its purpose was to promote Israel's supposedly charitable work, its love of peace, and to portray Arabs as violent and uncivilized, with a message that peace must be imposed to stop Arab barbarism. On top of that, Natasha would show Heba carefully selected documentary footage, images from inside Israel, showing what the land looked like before Israel built it up, and what it looked like after. I don't need to explain how thoroughly Heba's mind was rewired, because she wrote it herself. In her own diary, she wrote that she had come to despise her Arab roots because of what she called the savagery embedded in Arab history. And running underneath all of this, she kept hearing her father's voice in her head. He used to tell her, "We are people of money and influence, not people of wars. Be like your father. Put everything else behind you. Focus on money and power." But his advice didn't save her, because she chose a road unlike anything anyone had ever walked before. At one of those student parties, a handsome young man sat down at Heba's table alongside Natasha. He was direct, introduced himself without any pretense. An Israeli student of French descent, he spoke passionately about his homeland, about how beautiful Israel was, about how he and his people dreamed of a day when Arab hostility would dissolve and everyone would live in peace. "My friends, they've been lying since the very beginning, and I think the days we're living through right now have shown the whole world exactly who the real savage is." Anyway, from that warm, loving conversation, they moved to talk of relationships and past romances. And Heba, completely at ease, casually mentioned an Egyptian officer who used to follow her around at the Gezira Club. That officer, Farouk El-Feki, the one I told you to remember. The Israeli student's expression changed instantly. He knew he was sitting on a gold mine. He didn't waste time. He moved straight to the point, asked her for the officer's name, asked if she knew his specialty, and she told him everything. An engineering officer in Egypt's elite Thunderbolt forces. The young man's mind was racing. He said, "Tomorrow, meet me at the cultural center. We have a lot to talk about." The next day, Heba went, and the man she met was no longer the charming student. He was a senior case officer from the Mossad, Israeli military intelligence. He told her he wanted her to work with him, that together the two of them would carry out a mission greater than anything either could do alone, that they would be the architects of peace across the entire Middle East. A few pretty, hollow words, and he had a 25-year-old completely convinced. Over several sessions, Heba agreed, "I'm ready for any mission." And from that moment, she moved to a higher level entirely. She was trained by 4 Zionist intelligence officers. Secret inks, sign language, operating a transmission device, cipher codes, and visual signal communication. When she was fully operational, they gave her her first assignment. Go on vacation back to Egypt. Go straight to the Gezira Club. Find Captain Farouk Abdul Majid El-Feki. Get close to him by any means necessary, because he served in the missile division of Egypt's Thunderbolt forces. That was a treasure beyond value. And they didn't just teach her how to extract information from him. They taught her how to fully recruit him as a Mossad asset himself, including when and how to offer him the most generous financial deal of his life. And so, the next day, Heba flew back to Egypt. After 3 days of searching, she found Farouk, and the two of them began what looked like, from the outside, a one-sided love story. The plan: Heba would project strength, sophistication, and cultural superiority at every opportunity, and target his insecurities without him realizing it. She deliberately used French words he didn't know, 20 or 30 in every conversation, to emphasize the cultural gap between them. And when she translated them, she did so with a barely concealed condescension, making sure he felt small, inadequate, and powerless in her presence. She would describe experiences and places from Paris that didn't exist in Egypt, to reinforce the class divide between them. And every piece of clothing she wore, she'd mention the price, to make him feel the financial gap, to make him hunger for wealth he didn't have. She focused on his complexion, his build, the difference between him and the men of the West, how handsome and refined they were compared to him. All of it calculated, all of it deliberate, all serving the same purpose. She kept this up for 7 days, and as any man would, driven by instinct, by ego, by the primal need to prove himself to the woman he loved, Farouk began doing the unthinkable. He started volunteering military secrets, classified details, anything to look powerful in her eyes. There was not a single military secret in Egypt that he didn't eventually share. He had walked straight into the trap, and now Heba could pull anything she wanted out of him. She moved their meetings to a private apartment in the Mahdi district. Farouk would come, he would talk, she would listen and praise. How powerful you are. He gave her officer names, troop rotations, border patrol schedules. When she feigned disbelief, when she doubted him, he'd bring her proof the next day. A map, a document, a blueprint. There was one time she asked him, almost casually, to bring her the classified map of Egypt's frontline air defense missile batteries. He didn't even pause to question why she wanted it. He brought it the next day. How does a man fall this far? Love doesn't just make you blind. Apparently it makes you a walking national security catastrophe. Some sources also confirm that Heba was funneling Mossad money to him, enormous sums, all framed as generosity, as love, which meant he could never refuse her anything. This continued until the day she told him everything and offered him a deal: help her, become her partner, stop this war. In return, a French passport, financial rewards and privileges beyond anything he could dream of. And tragically, Farouk agreed. Then fate intervened, because at precisely this moment, Farouk was promoted. He became chief of staff for the commander of Egypt's Thunderbolt forces, General Nabil Shukri. There was now nothing he couldn't access. Officer names, weapons inventory, operational plans, everything. He delivered it all. And once Heba knew he was fully operational, she left him and flew back to Paris. Because he'd done enough. There was nothing left for her to extract in person. Before she left, she handed him a transmission device. "Keep going," she told him. "You've already done more than I could." And he did. He kept transmitting. At this time, Egypt was quietly preparing for the October War. Thunderbolt engineers were installing Soviet-supplied air defense missile batteries along the entire length of the border. But every time a unit began setting up a new position, Israeli fighter jets appeared and destroyed it with precision before the site was even finished, before a single missile was ready. This happened over and over for an entire year. Dozens of Egyptian soldiers killed, millions of dollars in equipment destroyed, months of effort erased in minutes. Egypt's military intelligence knew there was a leak, a devastating one, from the very top. Now pay close attention, because this is where things get brilliant. The first move military intelligence made was to begin issuing contradictory tactical plans, each one delivered to a specific isolated group of senior officers. Then they watched and waited. Every time a particular plan leaked to the Israelis, they knew which group had seen it. After 3 months of surveillance, Egyptian intelligence was certain. The traitor was not ordinary. He was a senior officer, first tier, and crucially, he served in the Thunderbolt forces. General Fuad Mahmoud Nassar, chief of military intelligence, personally took over the investigation after President Sadat made clear just how seriously he was treating this matter. Nassar was the right man. He knew the agency inside out and had personal relationships with most of the officers involved. Think about what was happening here. A 25-year-old woman had put an entire nation, the nation of Egypt, on full alert. Every Thunderbolt officer was now under surveillance. The circle of suspects narrowed, all the way down to the missile division attached to the Thunderbolt forces. They were certain the traitor was a Thunderbolt officer. And now, listen closely to what happened next. During the investigation, every Thunderbolt officer was placed under total surveillance. Every move, every contact, including all outgoing and incoming correspondence. Intelligence officers were assigned to intercept letters, open them, read them, reseal them perfectly, without leaving a single trace that they had ever been opened. In 1972, buried among hundreds of routine letters, one caught their attention. It was written by an Egyptian officer to an Egyptian girl he loved, living in Paris. On the surface, a perfectly ordinary love letter, but at the very end, a single sentence that didn't belong. He had written, "I've finally installed the antenna, the reception device, and the radio is working beautifully at home." If this letter had been written 5 years earlier, nobody would have blinked. Radio was common, but this was 1972. Television had long since entered Egyptian homes, especially in the homes of the affluent and the military officer class. So why was a high-ranking military engineer excited enough about a radio to write about it to the woman he was in love with? The piece clicked. Without preamble, they identified the sender, Captain Engineer Farouk Abdulmajid El-Feki, and the revelation: he was serving as Chief of Staff for the commander of the Egyptian Thunderbolt Forces, General Nabil Shukri, the exact division they'd been investigating all along. Within hours, Farouk was in a cell, and there, he saw the stars in broad daylight. He confessed everything, without a fight, without conditions, everything. The arrest was kept completely classified. Intelligence forced Farouk to keep transmitting routine messages to Hiba so the Mossad wouldn't suspect anything had changed. And from that moment, they began preparing something extraordinary. This is the best part of the story. After Farouk's arrest, the news reached President Anwar Sadat, who issued a direct order of the highest urgency. Hiba must be captured, by any means, alive. Egyptian military intelligence began studying Hiba deeply, mapping her psychology, her relationships, her vulnerabilities. The goal: bring her in quietly, without alerting the Israelis, using the same principles of psychological manipulation she had used to destroy Farouk. 20 days after Farouk's arrest, the operation launched. Remember what I told you at the beginning of the video about Hiba's father, Abdul Rahman Salim Amer, that he was immensely wealthy, that he'd left government and moved to Libya, where the economic boom was making fortunes, and that he'd left his position and power behind to build private wealth? This man was Hiba's only blind spot. Intelligence had confirmed Hiba had no real relationship with her mother or her only brother. There were always tensions between them. But her father? He was everything to her. He was the only person in the world who could bring Hiba anywhere. But here was the challenge. The man had no principles, no conscience, cared about nothing but his money. How do you convince a man like that to cooperate when he knows it could lead to his daughter's execution? Egyptian intelligence had the answer. First, coordination at the highest level of secrecy was established between President Anwar Sadat and Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. Egyptian and Libyan intelligence then worked together to execute the plan. Egyptian ambassador to Libya, Fakhri Othman, went to meet Hiba's father. He didn't tell him his daughter was a spy. He told him the opposite. He said, "Your daughter has fallen in with Palestinian militant groups in Paris. They are planning a suicide attack on French soil, and she is caught in the middle. We need your help to get her out safely before it's too late." Hiba's father responded immediately, "Whatever you need, I'll do it. Just keep my daughter safe." The ambassador smiled. "That's exactly what we need to hear. We're halfway there." Then he laid out the plan. "We're going to admit you to a hospital here in Tripoli under the appearance of a medical emergency. You'll call Hiba and tell her you've had a heart attack, that you're living your final hours, that your last wish, your dying request, is to see her one more time before you go. If she suggests you travel to her, or tries to delay, you tell her you can't move, you're dying, it's impossible." Egyptian and Libyan intelligence staged the entire scene flawlessly. The father was admitted to a Tripoli hospital with fabricated medical records and charts showing a life-threatening cardiac event. Reports confirmed this man had hours left to live. He called Hiba. He was weeping. She tried everything to persuade him to travel to her instead. But he held the line. There was no way. He was dying. She had no choice. She would have to come to Libya. Hiba immediately contacted her Mossad handlers and told them everything, and the same day, they confirmed it. Her father was indeed in hospital. His condition was indeed critical. Her handlers begged her not to board the flight, but she refused to let her father die alone. Before she left, they gave her a final protocol. "The moment your plane lands at Tripoli airport, scream that your ring has been stolen, your $1 million diamond ring. Force the Libyan police to detain you for a report. Because if Egyptian intelligence is behind this, they won't be able to touch you once Libyan police are involved. You'll be in Libyan custody, untouchable, while you confirm whether the situation is safe." A clever tactic, completely useless against a joint state operation, because Libyan intelligence was already part of the plan. Whatever she did, it would make no difference. Egyptian and Libyan intelligence had cooked this one together from the start. Hiba's plane landed. She executed the ring protocol exactly as instructed. She cried. She screamed. Ambassador Fakhri Othman received her personally. The two of them were taken to the airport's VIP lounge to handle the police report. The atmosphere was warm, completely relaxed. So relaxed that Hiba walked to the airport payphone and called her Mossad contact to report. "Everything's fine. The ambassador met me. We're having juice. Nothing suspicious." She hung up the phone. The ambassador smiled and said, "Shall we go see your father?" Instead of walking toward the exit, he walked her straight back out onto the tarmac. And there, Hiba saw a plane, standing at the foot of the stairs, Egyptian intelligence officers. In a matter of seconds, Hiba was on board. The cabin doors sealed. The aircraft took off, from Tripoli to Cairo, and straight to the intelligence headquarters. Like Farouk before her, she confessed immediately. Everything. Hiba was sentenced to death by hanging. Farouk, death by military firing squad. And the moment the verdicts were issued, the Israeli Prime Minister personally contacted the American president and demanded Washington intervene to secure Hiba's release. Because if Israel abandoned their highest profile asset, it would shatter their credibility with every deep cover operative they had ever recruited worldwide. They had to appear to care. They had to fight for her. They had to make their assets believe they would never be abandoned. Which brings us back to the opening of this video. Kissinger arrived in Egypt. He asked for Hiba, and Sadat looked him in the eye and said, "She's already been executed." But Hiba was alive, sitting in Al-Qanatar prison, waiting, still believing Israel would come for her. The moment Kissinger's meeting with Sadat ended, before Kissinger had even cleared the palace gates, Sadat whispered to his deputy, "Execute them both, immediately." And so, at maximum speed, Hiba was transferred from Al-Qanatar prison to the Cairo Court of Appeal prison. And there, the sentence was carried out. Hours later, Farouk El-Feki was executed by firing squad. And among the soldiers who pulled the triggers was General Nabil Shukri, the very commander whose trust Farouk had destroyed. And the lesson that deserves to be taken from all of this. Money is not always the reason people betray their country. Hiba and others like her came from wealthy families. They had everything. And yet, with a handful of doctored images and a few manipulative videos, their minds were completely rewired, just as they attempt with the entire world today. So understand the game. Be aware of it. Because even if the methods change, the goal is always the same. Distort the truth, discredit the facts, and reprogram minds. That was our story today. I hope it moved you. And if you've made it this far, I need something from you. Tell me in the comments. During Ramadan, I'm planning to release more episodes. And since it's an Arab month, I've decided to make all the topics Arab. Are you with me on that idea? Let me know. Write your thoughts in the comments. And if you're interested in strange topics connected to this world, I recommend you watch the End of the World video, where I told the story of the 5 cows theory. It sounds absurd, but it's completely real and dangerously serious. I'm Amin the narrator. Peace, and I'll see you in the next video.